introduction. I think it's all about communication. And the best way I know how to do that is through relationships. I think preaching should be self-revelatory. That is, I think they need to see and hear a little bit about me and my struggles and my victories, as well as the historical references and what this Greek word may be or that Hebrew word may be. I think it's really important that they know that the person in the pulpit or out front is hopefully relatable, and I try to be. So I've always shared some in my sermons about my own life. When I left Columbia, one young lady said to me, she said, Pastor, I don't get, why do you always tell stories about yourself? And I tried to explain it to her, but she came back to me about 6 months later and she said, now I get it. She said, you would tell stories about you and your family, and that was nice. She said, but the guy who followed you, he just, all he ever does is talk about Jesus. I'm like, well, I hope that I also talk about Jesus, but it's about my faith journey, trying to follow Jesus. So self-revelatory, and it has to speak to the context. What I said in Jonestown, I can still remember when I was packing up to move, and I had saved a lot of my sermons and I had them tucked into the bulletins and such. And the guy who was helping me pack said, where do you want these? And I said, we're going to throw them out, because whatever I said in Jonestown would not apply to Columbia. And whatever I said in Columbia would not apply to West Lawn. Maybe, within certain parameters it does, but I think preaching is contextual. Dawn was talking about the flooding. If West Lawn or Spring Township had suffered severe flooding, and we had some of the flash flooding, but not to the best of my knowledge, no folks in the church were devastated by flooding. If they had been, we would have been talking about flooding. We would have been talking about God's faithfulness in that. So whatever I say this Sunday is going to be heavily, I hope, contextual to what's going on here in West Lawn, what's going on in my life, and so on. And so in that sense, whatever I say today, you can take it or leave it. But if I may, Dawn asked me to speak to the lectionary. I have it from the gospel lesson. Lisa and I are in a process of preaching the epistle lessons in a retirement community in this area. But for last week in this, we were preaching on, and next week actually as well, the following. Anyway, we're preaching on the gospel lessons. And so this week's lesson comes from Mark's gospel in the 8th chapter. And if I can just is it okay, Dawn, if I take a minute to read through the scripture? So I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. It says, Jesus, starting in verse 27, 8:27 and following, Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, he asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they answered him, John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. He asked them, but who do you say that I am? And Peter answered him, you are the Messiah. And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all of this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, if any want to be my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words, in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them, the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Wow. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of stuff. And as I started taking some notes on that, we could preach on this for the whole month of September, just this passage. But obviously there's, how many of you, by the way, are preaching this Sunday? Just curious. And of course, the people we can't see, we'll just assume you're preaching on Sunday. But so Peter's confession starts with Peter's confession. And that was originally where I was headed with this. But then 2 weeks ago, I was preaching and I got into the confession piece. And so I sort of walked all over that. So we're not going to focus on that exclusively this Sunday. But there's a verse 27 to 30 with Peter's confession. There's a whole section in there, verses 31, 32, 33. It's only 3 verses, but where he talks about the suffering. We're not really good at suffering, or some of us aren't, but that the Son of Man is going to have to suffer. And then the interesting part to me is always Peter's rebuke. That the Son of Man will suffer doesn't seem so startling to me. It should startle each of us, but we've heard it so many times, it feels probably old and familiar. But Peter rebukes him, and I think that's worthy of note as well. Then he gets to 34 to 38, where he talks about followers of Jesus. We're always, I hope, actually Chris and Lisa can challenge me on this, but we're always trying to challenge our people to be followers of Jesus, to follow Jesus more closely today than we did in the past. Hi, David. To follow Jesus more closely in the past than we, more closely in the future than we did in the past. To walk a little bit more closely to Jesus today than we did yesterday. So to follow Jesus, Jesus says, what? Of course, if you like a 3-point sermon, deny yourselves. You want to be a follower of Jesus, you have to deny yourself. A disciple will deny themselves, will take up their cross, and will follow me. I just put a little note down here. I didn't pick the hymns yet for this week. We try to pick them in advance, but I have decided to follow Jesus. It's probably going to work its way in at some point into this week's sermon. And of course, you know the song, but though none go with me, still I will follow. I think our people need to know, the people that I get to preach to need to know that it's not always going to be an easy task or an easy path, but while sometimes we feel like we're alone, still we follow because we're following Jesus, and hopefully not the ways of this world. And then there's the whole thing about the whole, what are you going to gain? You can gain the whole world, but forfeit your life. And he goes on to say, and I think this is powerful, those who are ashamed of me. And one could explore what it means to be ashamed of Jesus, because I don't think many of us act in ways that I don't think we would say I'm ashamed of Jesus, but maybe we could challenge our people as we've been challenged in our own lives. How many times have we bitten our tongue when we knew we could have said something, when we knew we should have said something, when God opens a door for us to say something in a casual relationship? That's hard. Just very quickly, because I love to tell stories. I was visiting a person at Reading Hospital one time, and they were in the infusion center. They were getting their chemotherapy, and I was sitting with them for a while they were getting that. And as I'm there, the nurse comes over, and I don't know why, but she questioned who I was and why I was there. And so I told her, and we started to have this conversation about her spirituality. It was not what I was expecting. It's not what I was looking for. I was just trying to be a comforting presence to somebody in the church who was going through a difficult time. And I shared up to a point, but when I felt like I had an opportunity to say to this person, do you know where you stand with Jesus? I don't know what made me do it, but I backed off. And I sort of kicked myself after that. And what I shared the next Sunday in church was that it's really hard for all of us to know where to go and how far to go and what to say, and that I'm not always going to make the right decision, and you may not either, but isn't it amazing how God continues to open doors for us so that we can share, so that we're not ashamed, that we're not bragging, but confident in our decision to follow Jesus. He said, if you're ashamed of me and of my words. And then he refers to us as this adulterous and sinful generation. Well, he was speaking 2,000 years ago, but, I think adulterous and sinful generation can still apply. And then he goes on to say the Son of Man will also be ashamed. And I would just point out, I've been doing a study in Mark, leading a Tuesday morning Bible study, actually. I picked it up when they were in like the 4th chapter. That was 2 years ago. And we're in chapter 14 today, near the end of 14. And I made a commitment. I promised Lisa and Chris Hardy that I would finish up the Gospel of Mark before next summer. So as we were talking, though, Mark sometimes bookends a passage. And it seems to me it's sort of a bookend here. It starts with Peter's confession, and it ends with talking about really those who are not willing to confess. And then we have all that stuff in the middle. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. I don't know if you have written your sermon yet for this week, or what you're planning to do, where you're planning to go with it. But there are a lot of things here in my mind. By the way, I'm not a great teacher, but I do talk a lot. So if you want to get a word in, just raise your hand and I'll shut up. But the first thing that I was thinking of, Peter's confession. I'm not preaching on this, but you are the Christ. I could preach a whole sermon on you are the Christ, because we're talking about not just a teacher, not just a rabbi, but to Jesus of Nazareth, fully human, and yet we also know fully divine. But you who we're talking about, Jesus, are, it's present tense. It's right here, right now. You still are, not just 2,000 years ago, but today and of course forever. And not just you are a Christ, or you are one Christ, or you're a really good Christ, or you're a really good path, but he says you are the Christ. And I don't hesitate to say that I believe when Jesus said, "No one comes to the Father but by me," I think he meant that. I know we don't all agree on every point in the scriptures, but I think there's something to be said about the fact that he is the Christ. And of course, you could talk at length about what it means to be the Christ, the anointed one, God's son. We were talking about blessing this week in worship, this past Sunday. And so we offered a blessing. Pastor Chris Hardy suggested it. And so we invited the congregation to come forward and receive a blessing, because we're all weary. At West Lawn, we've been worshiping together in person since middle of January. And before that, last year from July until Christmas Day. So we have lost a lot of time to COVID, but not as much as some. But we're weary, and we just went back to masking. So we tried to come up with a way that was gave people an opportunity for a tangible response. And so Chris and I masked. We just went back to masking. Nobody likes it. Not everybody's in favor of it, but most of them wore them. And we said, come forward. We're vaccinated. We'll be masked. I'll clean my hands before I do it, but we want to anoint you. And we had some anointing balm in the center, and we told them how they can anoint themselves, or a husband and wife or a couple can anoint themselves. But no one did that. But to our surprise, to my surprise, almost everybody in the service came forward for that anointing, because they are just so weary, as I think we all are, weary of the pandemic, weary of the restrictions, weary of the lack of civility. We talked about a lot of different things, but it was so powerful. Lisa at 11, Chris at 8 and 9:30, we got to anoint these people, and for me that turned into a very short prayer of blessing for each one of them, and it was powerful. And so even though we had masks on, people were still, I think, yearning for that sort of thing. So what does it mean to be the anointed one? God's son, the savior, the Lord of all. It could go another way, but we won't. Anyway, another piece. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Is anybody listening? Okay. Then, the whole piece on deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. That just screams, as I said earlier, of a sort of a 3-point sermon. But to me, like, it's not what we like to hear. The whole denial of self. We want, maybe I'm alone in this, but I don't think so. We serve a congregation that's just like the rest of our community. We want to be pampered. We want to be served. I had to laugh. Our newest staff member who leads our contemporary music worship piece got his first piece of criticism by email, suggesting, hey, I love the new songs, but nobody's singing because you're singing new songs, sort of the backhanded compliment thing. And anyway, everybody has, they want to be out in an hour. When you anoint people and everybody comes forward, every service ran over. Well, except maybe Chris's, I don't know. But the 3 services I preached at, every one of them ran over. Not what they want. Deny yourself. I just wonder if we might not explore. Perhaps you could explore what it means for you and for your congregation to deny themselves or to take up your cross. There's an interesting concept. What cross do we bear? What cross do we bear as followers of Jesus? He talks about, are we ashamed of him? Are we, or are we willing to honor him and acknowledge him in our lives? I wear a cross necklace. A lady gave it to me more than 20 years ago. She was my church secretary in Colombia. And I wear this every day. It's even got some, if you could see it, some teeth marks from where my grandsons have gnawed on it when they were teething. And my grandson recently apologized for that. I said, that just makes it more precious to me. But sometimes I have to remember, because when I have interactions in the store, and if I would actually say the things that I'm thinking, and then they see that, they're going to wonder, what kind of a Christian are you? And quite honestly, it always reminds me, or often reminds me, what kind of a Christian am I? So what kind of a cross do we bear? Yes.
No, I just wanted to say something while you were on deny. I was,
oh yeah.
I just did a really, really quick search, and I'm not a scholar, but it's the same word used when Peter is told he's going to deny Christ. And I don't know, that just stood out to me. The contrast there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I just offer that to you as an observation.
I love that. And you could really run with that. I was talking in this Bible study this morning about Judas. What really hurts in the betrayal is he was one of the 12, and he betrayed him with a kiss. And I tried to emphasize, if Judas could betray Jesus, we can betray Jesus. Jesus acknowledged that some of us will deny him, or rather that we need to deny ourselves. He does later talk about the denial, but that we need to deny ourselves, take up our cross. Everybody here and everybody in your pews or chairs or wherever you're preaching to online, we all have our hot buttons, those buttons you push that just make us respond in un-Christ-like ways. And for some of us, the cross may be, I think it was Bill Hybels who I first heard use the phrase, holy discontent. There are people in my church that are passionate about certain issues, and they get really mad when I am not passionate about their issue. But I also get frustrated when they're not passionate about mine. And so I hope, can learn to live together. But for me to take up my cross means that maybe I need to do something about some of the things that are not easy for me. One of my, David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's just the things that you were talking about made me wonder if you would talk about about wearing masks as a kind of denial of self?
Well, I think you could. And we talked about it in terms of the prices that we've paid. I opened up with what are the casualties of COVID, and masking and physical distancing, because to say social distancing drives me crazy because we're social beings. The little things like the conveniences of shopping, but then I talked about the lack of civility and the fact that whether it's masking or what, this has led us to say ungodly, unchrist-like things and behave in unchrist-like ways. And I quoted a lady, I read this out of the Reading Eagle. Lisa has heard this several times now, but the quote was this. She said, because she was screaming at school board members, she said, "I have a constitutional right to be mean." And I said it twice. And then I said, and maybe she does, but there's no room for that in the body of Christ. Because when we pledge our allegiance to the realm of God, Christ holds us to a higher standard than just a constitutional standard. Yeah. One of my places of holy discontent, for whatever reason, I probably shouldn't say it because somebody will get mad, but I get furious about guns. And I shouldn't say this because you'll be disappointed in me, but I just don't get upset the way people in the church want me to get upset about abortion. Everybody has their issues. And some people can't understand. I mean, some people choose their presidential candidates on one issue. So we won't go there. But when I've been leading the prayers on a Sunday after another horrific shooting, or if we start to just read the names of the people, or the number of shootings that took place, mass shootings, when I talk about gun violence, it just drives me crazy. And yet, when Dawn reached out to me in the spring to ask if West Lawn would do one of those, what did you call them, Dawn?
I know what you're talking about. The
T-shirts on the lawn.
Yeah, correct.
I said,
Memorial to the Lost.
Yeah, thank you, David. Memorial to the Lost. It was escaping my brain. Thanks.
I feel so passionate about gun violence, and yet I failed. No pun intended, I guess, to pull the trigger on that one. I said, no, we're not there yet. Maybe it's because it's my issue. Maybe I was afraid. I don't know. But there has to be a level of holy discontent in our lives. And the key is, I guess, to not make them naturally assume whatever it is for you and you for them, but to help them discover where are the ways that God is speaking into their lives. Because if abortion is the issue, then do something about it. And if gun control is the issue, then maybe I need to do more about it. And Pastor Chris has challenged us a number of times on racism at West Lawn. And he's paid a little bit of a price for that, but he hasn't backed off because there's a holy discontent within him. And I think part of that is what it means to take up our cross and be willing to pay the price for that. And of course, if we do that, then we have to, Jesus says, don't just deny yourselves, but he says, take up your cross and follow me. One of the, we can't ask people to do what we won't do. And I try to live that out throughout the life of the church here at West Lawn. We are, after a year and a half, we are going to reopen our community meals tomorrow night. I'm a little nervous about it, but when we serve these community meals, used to be pre-COVID, 400 some would come out, more than half from the community, not the church. And it's nothing to see, I'll take my turn holding the door. I'll take my turn washing the dishes. And I'm often seen running around the dining hall, bussing tables, because I'm not going to ask somebody else to do what I won't do. And so when when we talk about following Jesus, I think my phrase that I like to use is, I want to walk in such a way that I look a little bit more like Jesus tomorrow than I did today. And I think that's what it means to follow Jesus. Anyway, a couple of other notes that I took down, and I know I've been talking too long, Dawn, but Jesus talks about the true value of life. What does it profit to gain, and the whole idea of being ashamed. I think when we talk about being a follower of Jesus, there's something to be said about it's more than just an identity as a Christ follower, but Jesus asks us not to just say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and not just, yeah, I joined the church and I went through confirmation class, but to actually renounce ourselves. And David, the whole masking thing, in a sense, that's renouncing self, because no one that I know of really loves wearing a mask. But I told him, I wear a mask. I wear it to protect my grandsons who aren't old enough to be vaccinated. I wear it to protect the people at the store when I go in, and I wear it to protect myself from them. I don't tell them that, but I don't know who all those people are, and I don't know that I trust them. So anyway, just a thought. More like Jesus tomorrow than I am today. That whole idea of the cross, a willingness to renounce all for Christ. And there's a passage in Matthew. I don't like to jump around. When I went to seminary, the professor said, is actually Larry Stuckey. He said, if you don't have enough to say on one passage, then you haven't done your homework. But don't give me 20 different Bible verses just to prove you know them all. But Matthew 13, 45 and 46 talks about it. The idea of denying yourself. In Matthew 13 is the story, 2 verses, of one who, when he comes upon the pearl of great price, sells everything so that he might acquire that which is most valuable. And it seems to me that there's something to be said there about that, that to deny ourselves and to follow Christ is to be willing to let it all go and do whatever is necessary to know that peace that comes from Christ alone. Anyway, thank you, somebody. Over 500 mass shootings this year. That's really depressing. And how sad is it that it's not even surprising? Anyway, those are my thoughts, but I'm wondering what you folks are thinking about this passage, or if you're going to try to combine it with some of the other pieces.
What are folks thinking? Where are you headed? I'm thinking a lot about self-centeredness and denial. David and Jeff, both where you're going. What are others thinking? Tom, are you on this passage or on a different one this week? I'm putting Tom on the spot, Jeff.
You can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm on a different one. I'm preaching some creation stuff right now. So,
Oh,
but I'll tell you what, the piece about deny yourself, and you hit it right on the nail, right on the head there. This whole deny yourself thing, people seem to make it a really big deal. I'm going to deny myself, and and what scriptures tell us, people would go out of the way to make sure other people see us denying ourselves. But I'll be doggone if it's going to infringe upon my civil rights.
Right.
Where is the higher peace? Is it scriptural, or is it what is given to me by the U.S. Constitution? Because I'm not sure you can prove one or stand on one without grasping the other in different ways. So I think you hit it right on the head there. With your permission, I'd like to use that. So
run for it.
Everything at the preaching forum is free. No, I'm just kidding.
By the way, Tom, you're talking about creation. One time, Sherry Lance and I did a 6-part sermon series on creation care. And we found out that was about 4 sermons too many on creation. So
I'm really I'm going to start off with creation and then get into some of that other stuff in Genesis that is just really those overarching stories, you know. So we'll see how it goes.
yeah, we love to preach for what it's worth. We love to preach on. Let me just interrupt that. Rick Edmond raised a hand. Okay. Anyway,
There we go.
Are you there, Rick?
I'm working off of Jesus' question. Who do people say that I am?
Yeah, I would jump on that, except like I said, I got ahead of myself and really preached on that last week. 2 Sundays ago. But I think that's a great question because we can all talk about who we think Jesus is, which is really who do others say that I am? But what comes down, Jesus really wants to know, who do you say that I am? And so part of my challenge at the end of that message was, you need to come to grips. You need to own and you need to embrace who you think Jesus is and understand the consequences that go with that, or the blessings.
And then Peter answers a brilliant answer. You're the Messiah. And then a couple sentences later, he's getting rebuked by Jesus for what he said. So we go back and forth too.
Well, Lisa and Chris can tell you that I talk also a lot about head knowledge versus heart knowledge. Peter knew in his head, but he didn't understand in his heart what it was going to mean, that to follow Jesus sometimes doesn't mean we get it all. Doesn't mean we become the party in power. Doesn't mean we get our way. And so, yeah.
How are folks, this is a little off the lectionary, but are incorporating the anniversary of September 11th? Is that feeding into your preaching this weekend at all? And if so, in what ways? Or Jeff, are you doing anything with September 11th?
We had planned to do something big the day before, but it fell through. And honestly, as I was sharing with Dawn at the beginning, everything is contextual with preaching, and there's other stuff going on at West Lawn that we're going to be focusing on. So I'm guessing that we will include, I didn't pick a patriotic hymn, but I'm guessing we will include something in the prayer time because we can't overlook that. People are going to be looking for that. But no, it wasn't in my preaching plan.
Jeff and others, I just put a hymn in the chat that was written, I believe, on the 5th anniversary of 9/11. And I think it can be used again this year for those that haven't fully finalized their bulletins. It's a really good hymn, and it works 20 years later as well.
We have sung some of her hymns in the past. They're always timely and very easy because I don't know this one just looking at it, but they're usually 2 tunes that people already know.
Absolutely. Yep. So lead on, O King Eternal.
Yep.
So yes, it's a well-known tune.
I suppose, Dawn, one other thought in reference to 9/11. If your community was really touched by that, my recollection is there are some communities in Philadelphia where they lost people. I don't know that we make that claim here, but there are firefighters and first responders who will be touched by that, remembering that, patriotic folks who, I'm a patriotic folk, but those who wear the flag a little more broadly, who will want something there. So yeah, we'll probably touch off on that, but I don't know if I have the courage to say it, but part of deny yourself is to deny that holy indignation that we feel as we were attacked and we were put upon. Well, I think Jesus calls us to humility.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely. And tying that, right? What does it mean to be in relationship with our neighbors throughout the globe? And yeah, many ways to engage it. And then also an outreach opportunity, as you said. So people who are hurting in our communities, first responders, others that we could invite to our worship service as we remember. So I think there's a way to bridge both remembering and what does it look like to follow Jesus into those places. So I think you're right on, Jeff, with that.
Maybe you could honor first responders as people who have chosen by vocation or whatever, as people who literally deny themselves by rushing into the scene when we would be so quick to run away.
Yeah, great link there. Anyone else? We're early. We have 20 minutes, but we can shut down early. But anyone else going a place or something spoke to you in the gospel or any of the other passages you want to share this afternoon with us?
Lisa, you're preaching on James tomorrow, aren't you?
James chapter 2. Yeah. At one of the retirement homes.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's always a challenge preaching there. One, it's a different demographic, even if my hair is white. They are older than I am. And two, it's the
Speak slow.
Cadillac of retirement homes. These people are comfortable in their living.
Yeah. Speak slow and loud.
And don't make them late for lunch.
Right, Tom. That is, and get out of the way of any wheelchairs. This has been a terrible conversation, but that is all true. So, well, I want to thank Jeff for being our leadoff preacher for the fall. I want to invite you back next week as we continue. We're going to run this through the fall. I was chatting with a few folks. If folks are using the narrative lectionary at any point, let me know that. That's a new series that's come out, and we could run we could run a month of this related to the narrative lectionary. So right now we're on the RCL, but that might be something we can look at and learn about. So anyway, I have that on my radar. But I want to thank Jeff and for all of you for contributing this week. We pray that God will show up and be present with you as you speak the word and share the word with your churches and communities this week. So thank you all. God bless you and have a great afternoon. Jeff,
Thanks, Dawn. And good to
thanks.
see everybody. Good luck
Take
this
care.
week.
Bye, friends.